it's such a pleasure to meet you, but I do find it strange that it's not like Brave Words has been around for like 100 years, but we've been around a little bit and we haven't really crossed paths too much. So it's a really pleasure to meet you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah, I enjoy reading it. It's great. It's a great place to go and pick up some pretty cool stories. You've always been really good at covering what I suppose you'd call it the fringe. And I've picked up some pretty good bands over the years just by seeing something that you guys have written about. It's like, oh, check them out. The review section's always very good. So I actually trust your reviewers, which is really important. When I started writing, that was one of the most important things, is to get for people to know that you were trustworthy, that what you were saying was what you meant. So.
And that is actually one of the most viewed, and obviously that we started out as a magazine, but in terms of like bringing the website on board, that is like one of the most viewed like areas of the website. Yeah, people love opinions. They want to, pipe in and just read about it. It's incredible.
I think it's timeless. I think you really want. I think there was all this thing, right, when the internet was first hitting, wow, you can put anything out, it can go everywhere, do whatever. At the end of the day, our brains can only capacitate so much, and you want someone to help curate, and you're going to trust certain people's taste over others. And if you don't trust someone's taste, but you enjoy their work, then maybe you try it anyway. That was what the old music press was. The music press I got into, that's what that was all about. It was, it wasn't, I think people lost the gauge of, I think people thought you were being a narcissist and writing about yourself. It wasn't really anything like that. It was about being, strong enough to stand up and say, hey, this is what I think. And, if you like my taste, I'm telling you, you'll like this. And if you don't like it, but you fancy experimenting, go for it. It's nice to see some personality back in review writing. And I think that you guys have that, which is really cool.
Well, thank you very much. You're actually one of the reasons why my garage is still filled with all these magazines. And I will be honest with you, without Kerrang in the early days and Burn, you know what I mean? Like the pillars, Brave Words. I wouldn't even be here without your influence.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think Jeff Barton will probably take that crown for sure.
Well, but collectively.
Yeah, we were all in there together. My thing, I got started with sounds when I was 16, right? So that was really big. So I was on the national papers and so on and so forth. But before we start, seeing as I'll tell you a funny story. I had such huge rows with sounds when I was like 16, 17, because the editor who came in was a right prick. And I wasn't quite strong enough I didn't think I was standing up for myself, but I apparently was. And to cut a long story short, we were in an editorial building that had a corridor. It's no exaggeration. It must have been about a city block long. So you're talking hundreds of feet. It's like this long corridor. There was, I say hundreds of feet long, this corridor, hundreds of feet. And I was literally, Tony Stewart, who's the editor of Sounds, hated me so much, he decided to sack me on the spot one day and had me frog marched out of the building by 2 security guys, which was really pretty humiliating. You're going past all the other magazines in their areas and so on. And when I got to the lobby, Jeff Barton was coming through the other side because Kerrang was the only other office that was further away down that corridor than Sounds. Yeah. So Barton looks at me and he says, aren't you moving to America this summer? I'm like, I am. Yeah, I'm going. He goes, there's fancy writing for Kerrang. I said, yeah, I certainly do. And he just looked at the security guards. He said, you can let him go, lads. He's with me now. And so the security guards let me go. He turned me around and frog marched me right back down past Tony Stewart's desk. And just looked at Tony. He goes, Steph's writing for Kerrang now. And I was just like, so, yes. So I have to tell you, Jeff Barton, I've tried to find him in the last few years. He's gone quite underground, but Jeff Barton, massive figure for all of us, right? Massive. Have you ever seen a picture of Jeff?
I don't think I've ever seen a picture of Jeff, to be honest with you.
He's not what you would think. Okay. He looks like an insurance salesman from Cobham. That makes it all the better. Anyway, sorry, I've gone on and on enough. So
no. But I know we've got like limited time, but just one more last little question because I'm very passionate about all this stuff.
Go for it.
And just imagine you being based in England and like influencing somebody in Ontario
Yeah,
who
it's amazing.
then launched,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, and this is where we are, but
yeah,
it was a massive influence. It really
oh,
was.
that's excellent. I got to ask you, were you at a Venom show in Ontario in March 1985?
I was pretty young.
Oh, okay. So yeah. I only asked that because I was, and it was after a particularly violent night of drinking on a plane, which nearly got me barred from entering Canada. I don't know why. I just thought it might be anyway. Anyway,
But no, but I will say I've been really blessed to meet all the members. And
oh,
Tony, I love him to death.
yeah,
But like,
yeah.
like all the
Lovely.
originals are just gems, and that's just another story entirely. So let's get on
That's
to
all right. Yeah, let's get on to it.
let's get on to the
We'll
point.
keep in touch. Yes,
Um,
go for it.
like it's like this album is so dear, and I must credit Adam Sewell, who I've known forever and I love to death.
Great bloke.
And I asked him a couple of months ago who like should we talk to about this, because not to be disrespectful, the producer's dead, like all the musicians are dead, and he pointed at you, and here we are. And it's well, because we're so passionate about the actual album, like how does it feel, the fact that like we're talking about something when everyone has passed away? I guess it's obviously the ultimate tribute.
Yeah, that's a really good. I mean, first of all, Adam's a great bloke. Love Adam, and keep in loose touch. I've got to step up the communication here again a little bit. I hope he's doing okay. He probably he was the last time I spoke with him, so that's good. But he's got some Glenn Matlock stuff going, I think, so which is very cool. So, yeah, I mean, I've reflected on that every so often. That the fact that none of the members who made this masterpiece are alive. I think there's two ways really to look at it, and it really does become a positive versus negative outlook. And we'll start with the negative first. The negative is, oh fuck, none of them are alive. But the positive is that the album is so utterly immortal, and the music is so immortal that when you put it on, if you are swinging with it, and if you're going with it, it sounds like they're very alive. It sounds like they're right there. It sounds like so timeless and so brilliant. It's so. I tend to try and use the positive, because I mean, it's what a timeless piece of work, and every time I play it, I hear life. You know what I mean? So that's the way I choose to view it.
I love that. That's really wonderful to say. No, beautiful. Yeah. So where does the actual Motorhead connection begin? Was
for
it
me?
For you, was it pre Ace of Spades, or where did
as
you
a fan
as a fan and a professional?
Okay, well, there's an intersection actually with the two very early on. So as a fan, I think Overkill was the first record to cross my path in late '79. My father was very into music, and I was already into like the Stranglers and David Bowie and Ian Dury, and he got me on that track, Pink Floyd. And so I think it was Motorhead, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest were the first three bands I've discovered by myself. So it would have been Overkill, then Spades obviously very quickly. I didn't see the band live until the Iron Fist tour. I did not get to an Ace of Spades gig. And then it really wasn't very, very long after that there was an intersection in between fan and professional. I was an ardent reporter for the world famous Hollyvine school magazine, which was 4 sheets of A4 paper photocopied prodigiously every month and stapled together by me and my mate with a circulation of about 30. So as you can see, an internationally renowned publication, but it's important to us. And I don't know, somewhere in there I thought, it'd be really good, it'd be great if we could do a story on Lemmy. It'd be brilliant. So I sent a letter to a woman called Sue Manley, who was working at Greyberry Management at the time on the Great Western Road, working with Doug Smith's team. And Sue, I wrote, this basically a schoolboy letter, right? I mean, it's 1982. I'm 53. I was born in 1967. I mean, you do the math, but schoolboy. And I got back this typewritten, very official letter somewhat like receiving a letter from royalty, actually, and it said, "Lemmy requests your presence at the studio at 7 p.m. on a certain date." And I was like, "What? Like, bloody hell!" So I quickly rounded up my photographer, who was actually just my mate, who also loved Motorhead. Yeah, that's how, and he had a camera, so it's like, you're in. Yeah? So, and down we went, and so Lem opened the door to the studio. Lem answered the studio door, and immediately thrust a pint of vodka and orange in my hand, with the orange juice is only there for color. Showed me the mixing desk, and I was just away. It was like, there it is, turn it up. Here's the volume button. And he spent several hours. I mean, I've told the story before, but I mean, he really just went out of his way to make me feel welcome. And I can't even remember the questions I asked. I can certainly assure you they were probably not the most challenging questions he'd met in his career life, or even hour, actually. Probably been asked more challenging questions in that last hour. But he was brilliant. He treated me like I was from, you name any major publication. He treated me like that. And Filthy came in as well, which was really cool. And so I actually, that was my introduction. And that was when I started, first piece I did with him. And then I got work experience with Sounds in 1983. And so I did a violently obsequious rant about how Another Perfect Day was a great record and people should stop bagging on it, which actually I stand behind 100%. But at the time, yeah.
I love.
Yeah.
That's one of my top 3 Motorhead records.
That's a great record. But it's a great record. But at the time, of course, Brian Robertson was wearing shorts and disco vests, and he just wasn't. The image didn't fit. So a lot of people were down on Motorhead, which is really unfair because the record was great. And so I saw Lemmy. Saw Lemmy right after that piece was published. That was my first ever piece in a major paper. And he just gave me this big one-armed hug, which ended up with my nose in his armpit, and was just like, he was like, "Thanks, man." And so from that point on, we kept in touch. And I would write about them. And then as my Kerrang thing went, I was do tour stories, and I don't know, we just became. I think we became friends. I mean, we met in England, right? So when he moved to America, I think it was like a nice sort of connection to the old. To Britain, not the old days, but the middling days maybe, and we just really got on. It was just a thoroughly great bloke. I mean, he really was. I mean, what a font of wisdom. I mean, that's not, it's nothing weak about it. It was a font of wisdom. He was. I mean, I don't know, he was a bit like Oscar Wilde, I suppose, in many ways, because he was humorous and he was also incredibly smart. Yeah. He didn't have a cheese named after him like Oscar Wilde has, although Lem loved cheese. So actually, there's a thought. Maybe Lem should have had a cheese. Now, Lem loved cheese, and there is a cheddar that they've named Oscar Wilde cheddar, which is there's a tangent you weren't expecting. But anyway, I think I've never said this before, but I do think now thinking about it that Lem and Oscar Wilde probably have quite a lot in common. Wow. In terms of their wit and life observations. Yeah.
So the box set, obviously,
yes.
Like, it was a game changer. Like the first 2 records, like, we're metalheads. We could like lay it on the table, like we're classic. This really was a game changer. The songs started to become a little bit more mature, if you want to call it like that. Maybe more friendly in terms of radio, or there's a lot of sexual, you know what I mean? They went on a really different path. They really did.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Ace of Spades, we all talk about its power and we all talk about its might and its strength, etc. But I think you're right to point out the songwriting, because it somewhat does not get the attention it deserves. Much like Nevermind the Bollocks, I think, is an underrated album for songs in terms of, like, they're great fucking songs. Ace of Spades is exactly that. Very underrated, as you say, for the actual maturity of the writing and the fact that they were writing songs and they were actually working with the producer. I mean, I think the producer has a lot to do with it as well. But yes, there is a maturity for sure. It was such a, I mean, I suppose now you'd look back and say it was a lightning in a bottle moment, right? Although it's tough not to say that about Overkill. So, it does come down to the songs, though. You're right. There's a little more craft, a little more. I think as well, what else I love about it? There's some swing in those songs. Those songs have some groove, and there's some groovy fucking shit. Jailbait. I mean, the swing in that song is immense, right? I mean, so it's not just dugga 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 dugga. There's like it's like real groove, So who doesn't love that?
But also some really memorable, like not just lyrics, just like statements, like "Live to Win," "No Remorse."
Yes.
We Are the Road Crew, obviously, and that resonates so much these days with COVID, because it's not just the bands that are off the road; it's everyone behind the bands that are off the road. Sexually, I just love this. Like the Hammer is one of my favorite songs on the record, and just be amazing. Your wife. Like, it's, you know what I mean? They kind of cross that sexual thing. Obviously, Jailbait. There's a lot of stuff. I was 13 when this thing came out, and maybe I would have been jailbait. I didn't even know what it meant, jailbait.
No, I mean, it's interesting as well, because those songs, and they're talking about. I think one of the things with Lem, and this goes with everything that Lem's done, he's always done it. He's always enjoyed life. I think in a positive fashion and without any. I mean, he's the least. I mean, he was always the least seedy, least creepy. I mean, you never say that about him at all. I mean, he was just such a humanist, I suppose. So, when he talked about chicks, it was with joy. And also when he talked about chicks, women, whatever, we should probably say women, because he loved women. And I've always said this about him. It's a very important trait. He was raised by women. He had a deep appreciation of women, even though, you look at some of that stuff and you're like, wow, that's raunchy. There's still a deep appreciation of women. And how many hundreds of times did I see him backstage with women? And it was just always a super, even if it got saucy, there was respect and there was actually chivalry. It's a very chivalrous bloke, he really was. Treated everyone very well. So, it's a super important point to put across, I think. He had a great sense of manners,
So the early ideas to come up with this, like, I can't even hold it. Like, oh my God. Where did these early ideas, and to be a real pain in the ass, like, this is 40. What are you going to do when it's 50? But let's focus on 40. This is this is incredible. So tell me where the seeds were planted.
I will. And I will say, first and foremost, it takes a village, right? So there's a great team. It really is. Adam was part of that team for some time as well. And you've got the first of all, I have to say that Todd and Alex at the management are super supportive and really and really sort of trust that we know what we're doing in the curation of these sets. Then we've got Mick Stevenson and Robert Kewick, who we brought on board. I don't know if you know them. They're two of the biggest super Motorhead fans there are. And so we brought them on board just as really to make sure to keep us on track, because as much of a fan and an expert as one might feel they are, you can always consult with people who know more than you. And we felt that was a very smart, wise, and decent thing to do. And they're great blokes. So they were part of it. Miles and Emma at BMG, and I know this sounds like a roll call, but it isn't. They're all very important, because getting on the phone with Miles and just talking with him about what you want to do. It's really simple. We sat there we think it should be a Western style ammo box. I really wanted to have some sort of game table in there, like some sort of so you could play a game while you're watching, while you're listening and watching, so on and so forth. And the ideas build out from there. But the great thing with BMG is they are committed to making it work. And they also have a team of designers who are very, very they have an innate relationship with the band that surprises me. I mean, you've got a couple of guys, Neil and Joe, in there who are much younger than I am. Joe wasn't born when the record came out, but they, you can give them an idea of what you might want something to look like, and they just nail it and then triple it. I mean, what an amazing thing. So it sounds like, it might look like it was a hard thing to do, but it was fun because you just had these ideas, you put them out, there they are. You know, when it comes to the extra material, it's very much thinking about, I mean, I think, you know, we want this to be, an evening in, you know, I want it to be a party in your house. So, you know, listen to the record, you know, throw some dice, you know, read the tour book, sink into it, see, you know, feel it as an overall experience as best you can. And that was, you know, that's really what we hope for with it. And I hope it achieves it. I think it does, but it's a lot of people involved.
So how organized are the Motorhead archives?
They're pretty organized actually. And we've, again, you know, at the risk of turning this into what might seem, you know, like a roll call of names, and it's up to you whether you want to or not, but I will say our archivists, Shelley and Samuel, are superb, really great. And yes, you know, we can look to the right and say, hey, we need something from this era, that era. I mean, when it comes to selecting the live shows, you know, everything is catalogued and so on and so forth. So then it just becomes the horrible job of having to listen to shows from the Ace of Spades tour to find out which ones might work best in the box set. Oh, what a torture, right? I mean, it's very exciting. I mean, there's one show the first show I picked was that Orleans show, and that I threw that out to the committee, and we all agreed, yeah, this is fucking great. And when I first was listening to that, I was like, fuck me. He's on. I was literally sounded like he was on fire. Like early on in that set, he shouts like, "Oh yeah!" It's like this, like it's like you could see the fire coming out of his mouth, and that was brilliant. You know, so good, and it was so raw, and it had such a connection, I think, to the previous tours. And then the next set we put in, obviously, in you know, the next live show, is many months down the road, and you can hear already that there's been a movement in the way the band even play live, the way that there may be a little smooth is not the right word, but a little more, I don't know, they're just a little more school. They know they feel what they're doing on a more consistent basis. You know what I'm saying? So you get a difference even between the two shows on the tour, I think, and I hope people like those. You know, they're very exciting, I think.
Well, I've got, like, this is somebody from Canada that has a long box. Just
brilliant.
Just saying.
Oh, that's fantastic.
At fucking 13.
Yeah, the long box. That's great. You're gonna have to write a sidebar for everyone reading this on what a long box was.
Exactly. Well, how well did you actually, like, personally know the three of them at the time? I guess you were just like a writer doing.
Yeah. You mean when the album came out, I didn't know them. It was soon after that I got to know them. And Eddie, I didn't know very well at all. I got to know Eddie a little better later, you know, later years. And, you know, he was great, you know, really nice. Filthy, I mean, I have a very soft spot for Filthy. I always loved him. He's such a bubbly character and so, again, like I mean, definitely mental. I mean, in the best possible way. But, you know, I mean, I remember tours in the late 80s in the States. I remember one tour in particular, we were 2 weeks on a bus supporting Alice Cooper. 2 weeks, one hotel room in that 2 weeks. I think 15 people on the bus. So, you know, there was a lot going on, and just Filthy was just a constant source of amusement and entertainment. I mean, he really never slowed down. I mean, that I could see, you know. And yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's such a strange thing with Lem. I mean, he really, you know, I do not wish to sound corny, but he did sound, it was quite avuncular. You know what I mean? It really felt like an uncle in the sense of, you know, Uncle Lem, but he really felt like, I don't know, it was just, it's an interesting, you ask about how well, I knew him really, really well, but there was always, and how could it not be? It would always be a little bit of like, just a little bit of like looking up to him, you know? I mean, I mean, as much as, I mean, he and I had several arguments over creative things and so on and so forth, which you know, you had to. I wasn't going to be dishonest with him, or, you know, that wouldn't have been a friendship. That would have been a sycophancy, and Lem didn't have time for sycophants at all, which is another sterling quality of his, I may say. But still, it's still Lem, you know. But I think my favorite, I mean, I know you haven't asked this question, but I think my favorite moments, just to get it across to people, were the quiet moments. Just when you'd sit with him and either you'd be watching some TV or, you'd be watching some TV or you'd be, listening to some music and having a couple of drinks quietly, or in the dressing room when he would sit and read and just kind of hang out with him for a bit and so on. I think I really loved those moments because, there would be these occasional pearls of wisdom, he really did walk it like he talked it. I mean, he really did only have two types of people. You're either a good person or you're an arsehole. That was it. It's very, very hard. It's very unique. It's so hard to, I mean, and everyone's had a crack at this, and I've had a crack many times over, but I could never fully distill how unique he really was. I mean, in my opinion.
What, and I know we're going like left field here.
Please go where you want.
Because I'm like, I grew up with this. I love it to
Yes.
death. What did he think when the first Fastwake record came out and it really exploded? And to this day, it is, and it was really sad when obviously he died. Like Fast Eddie, we'll go into that. Like the first Fastwake record was like, whoa, it was an American hit, and Motorhead really didn't have an American hit like Fast Eddie did.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a radio.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest. I never asked him directly what he thought about it. I never, that was not, especially in the mid '80s. I was still sort of in the honeymoon phase of knowing that I could interview and talk with Lemmy. It was like, oh, well, this is great. So it wasn't a question I came up. I mean, I did actually do some stuff with Eddie around that time. I think he found it quite surprising that the band had this huge hit. There's, I mean, obviously Dave King's voice was a game changer, I think, in that sense. But one thing with Lem again, I've got to tell you, jealousy was not an emotion that he. I mean, those were not clothes that he wore. He was not about that. I mean, I never heard him speak in any ill way of any of them. As a matter of fact, whenever their names would come up over the years when they maybe weren't in communication, it would always be, if anything, with a little bit of longing that, it couldn't be, they weren't in touch, and then they would get back in touch. So, whilst I didn't ask him directly to answer your question, I think also by the fact that there aren't any quotes about it out there, will tell you he wouldn't have been bothered. He was not a jealous person. He just wasn't. Well, lovely.
I will mention that we are the same age. I'm a 67 baby.
Yeah.
And my ranking for Motorhead records would be Ace of Spades.
Yeah.
And Bastards and Another Perfect Day would be the top three. So I was really happy that you said Another Perfect Day, because I think with Iron Fist, it went down a really maybe rushed path. That was actually the last tour that in Toronto at the CNE, right? That famous.
There's a video of that.
And then they came back with I Got Mine. And I sat there and I listened to I Got Mine. I'm like, wow, I think I just got mine.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll tell you that one of the things about Another Perfect Day, which it's one of those records that just by mere context will always take fans a little longer to admit that they like. Sadly, this is just the way it works. But some of that material, I mean, Rocket on that record is just fantastic. One Track Mind. I mean, the dynamics and the writing of that album, and of course, I still think that the intro is one of the best intros to any Motorhead album. Who doesn't go around going top notch? Well, and
the artwork too, right?
Yeah. Actually, I've got to disagree with you on that. When it first came out, when I first saw the artwork, I was actually a little disappointed, to be fair. I was like, oh, really? I'm not really too sure what to make of it. I did like the back cover. I like the three of them, and I love the comic strip on the inner sleeve. But it took me actually longer to get to grips with the artwork. So I'm going to have to not go with you on that one. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate, now I would love to see it on a shirt. I think it would be a great shirt. So, but yeah.
Well, you've been with Motorhead a long time, right? Like
sure.
Post fact, I don't know if you had any input into, because Lemmy actually made Brave Words a cake.
I did not have any input. That's great.
And Well,
like,
I'll send you.
like
I'll send this to you. But yeah, like
great.
with our issue number 100.
Excellent.
Anyways,
Excellent.
can I take this really down a sad path?
Please,
Because it
go,
really was.
go wherever you need to go.
No, but it really was. I've never seen a funeral on my fucking TV.
Yeah.
Like I sat there and watched it. I think that well, hundreds of thousands of people sat and watched and cried and played Motorhead and just went, "What the fuck's going on?"
I thought it was an incredibly brave and fitting thing that management did to get that streamed. That they got some stick for it at the time. You know, I think people's first reaction to that is, you know, whoa, what's, you know, this doesn't seem right and everything so on. But Lemmy was definitely a man of the people, as we know, and it just I agree with everything. I think it was right to share that with people, right to share some stories and so on and so forth. You know, try to make it a celebration as best you can. But look, I mean, the truth of it is that I think everyone, I don't think anyone, rather, had really processed it for at least 6 months. I mean, it took me a long time to process it, and I still occasionally it just is like, what? Like, you know, it doesn't make sense. You know, I mean, the only thing that gives me comfort now is that I think of him in today's shit show, and it just doesn't make sense. He would just be. It would be like caging. It would be like caging someone. It would be so unfair. I mean, having said that, I love the opportunity to test it and see if we could still help him maintain his lifestyle in this current environment. But I think you know what I mean when I say that. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, I was glad to see some of the stories. I was glad that people, you know, turned up and spoke and told some fun stories as well. You know, but yeah, I mean, it was a shock. You know. Yeah.
Well, and then we lost 2 other pillars.
Yeah.
From that era.
Yeah.
So it's I guess life moves on, but the music moves on.
It does. I mean, one of the things that I will say, and I think I said this before, but I'll say it anyway. I think that when Filthy passed in November, that really was a major blow to Lem. I think Lem really felt that. He really felt that hard, you know. At that time, Lem was not one who would pick up his phone very much. He'd just be sent, you know, you'd shoot text, he might get back to you, so on and so forth. But as soon as I heard, and we heard very quickly that Filthy had passed, I decided to call him. He was in Europe, and he picked up on the first ring, which, as I say, is very unlike him at that point. And we had a 20-minute chat about it. And I just, you know, it was the one of the times I just really felt a profound, not exaggerated, not overwrought, but just very deep and natural sadness at Filthy's passing. I mean, it really was like, I remember I said to Todd afterwards, I was like, oh man, you know, this is really hitting him beyond hard. Like, you know, you could just feel it. And of course, I you know, I think it didn't help matters. It didn't help him, you know. That really hurt him, you know, for sure.
So how much of a brotherhood do you think, obviously it was a brotherhood, but like how deep of a brotherhood was that core of Motorhead?
Oh, I think, you know,
did they like each other? Did they want to fucking beat the shit of each other? Did
I
they
think
just
it
want
was
to
a
like
bit of
work,
all of
work?
it. Well, I think it was a bit of all of it, you know. I think there was a lot of explosion between them, but a lot of love as well. I think they were very earnest, how would I best put it? Three very earnest, very strong characters, each of them. They all had very definitive characters and very definitive roles. Or not roles, but very definitive personalities is what I'm saying. You know, when you mix those together with relatively young men, you know, and throw them in a van and have them tour together for a few years, I think that the concentration of that energy is impossible to deny, and it's always going to leave an impression on you, right? It's always going to leave an impression. And so I think that, I think that they were, they were family members to Lem in the way that maybe you had brothers and sisters that you then don't see for very much, for many years, but when you speak to them, it's like they're right there. You may have a friend like that. I have a couple of friends like that where if I don't speak to them for 4 or 5 years, but we somehow pick up the course like I spoke to them last week. It was very much that kind of relationship, I felt, I think a couple of times I would speculate, and it is speculation, that perhaps between them, they all let a little bit of pettiness get between them now and again. But, that happens with all of us. They found their way back on side always. They always did.
I actually biked today. I normally bike to death metal and black metal because I want it to drive me. I'm like, no, I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to listen to Ace of Spades from start to finish. Not that it's a light record, and the bass lines really just like hit me, and I'm like, this is a really bass driven record. And I thought, you know what, this is like how I'm comparing it to how Malcolm Young went into AC/DC records. Like, he wasn't flashy, but he was solid. And Lemmy, I don't think is known as he's the front man, but I think the bass player is kind of the secondary thing. And when you listen to Ace of Spades, the bass is like, he probably taught so many people how to play bass from that record. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, never forget as well that one of the things, and I'm sure you're not forgetting. I'm sure you know it like we all do. Lem was a rhythm guitarist who became a bass player, and that is such a huge influence on the sound, and that's such a huge influence on the bass style. And I think, if anything, what he did prove was to many bass players that you can use the bass. That the bass is not just there for a bit of sort of subliminal, rhythmic color occasionally. It's there for a hell of a lot more. It's an instrument in its own right, and it can drive, and it can pull, and it can twist and turn, it can bite, it can do all those things. I mean, and I think that's what them did more than anything. I mean, you're talking about, how many Motorhead songs start with him riffing, right? And I mean, he's riffing like a rhythm guitarist would. So, and I think also, got to say, the production of that record is fucking wonderful. I mean, and it's how many records do you hear today that are produced that well? It's just the perfect. The levels are incredible. Nobody is slighted. Everybody is heard, and yet the collective remains the single most important thing. So there's 3 elements orally that are incredibly hard to achieve, and they're all achieved on this record.
Okay, before we finish here, I would love to steer the conversation to you being part of. And I say they're the biggest band on the planet. And I have in my collection the whole Motörhead thing when Lemmy turned, it was 70, I guess. Like that whole
when they dressed up in 95 and he's 50.
Yeah, sorry. I'm
That's okay.
But the point is, so you were dealing with Motörhead and now I just find the whole so what thing, like, you are just like in the inner circle, my friend, like big time.
I mean, again, with them, you must remember. So Motorhead was the first. Like, I did that piece back in 1983. Yeah, the first paid pieces of writing I did for Sounds was a Ride the Lightning review, and going to Paris to do a story on the band in 1984. So we met when we were very young, right? And and then when I was moving here to America in '86, it was Cliff who, offered to show me around and so on and so forth. And then he didn't come back, sadly. And so I just started. Yeah, we started to all hang out together and so on. But I mean, I think the only way it could really have worked was, I mean, I was still doing stories on them, and so again, we go back to that balance of just people have to trust you. And one of the things I never wanted was for people to think that I was just going to do their bidding, and I mean, Metallica as people would never have wanted that either. That was not what they were about. So whenever we sat down with a tape recorder, me and Lars or me and James or whatever, I went for it as much as I could. I mean, I asked the questions that I felt. I actually always looked at the relationship as being one that allowed me to ask questions that other people wouldn't. as opposed to dodging things, you know. Yeah, but the other thing with me is I've never been into talking about, like, you know, how much partying someone's done and who's shagging who or whatever. That's like yesterday's fish and chip paper. I mean, I think fans want to know. I think fans more than anything want to try and know the people behind the art, and so that was always my aim. And fortunately, over the years, they've been very supportive of my endeavours to do that for them. And so, I mean, I think So What, I mean, like much like yourself, we've gone to the web now. So between the printed copies and the online, what I always hope is that any time a Metallica fan can look up a band interview or a member interview or a roundtable interview and see exactly where they were at that time. That's the important thing. It's like a timeline thing. It's like, okay, what was James thinking around the time of Saint Anger? Well, I can read this piece and get a feeling for it. And then you can juxtapose it with how James is feeling in 2020. And so that's hopefully what I'm doing, is sort of like a living chronicle. That's what I try to do. And they're, you know, they're incredibly supportive. I mean, it's, again, you know, this is another band who sometimes get a lot of stick, but they're incredibly supportive of what I need to do. And I can honestly tell you, I don't ever get told not to do something. I mean, it's remarkable. I got, you know, I mean, I started taking photos now and again with my, you know, little Leica camera. Started that 20 years ago. No one ever tells me not to take a picture. There's a lot of trust there. It's very cool. You know, it's great.
Well, you already said it. You all came to this from the same place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you talk about, I mean, let's synergize this part of the conversation and say that, you know, there's another part of what we're talking about, another person who was a massive Motörhead fan like you and I, and that was Lars.
Yeah.
I mean, James obviously as well, but Lars was, I mean, a fanatic. I mean, you know, and what was great is I learned something from Lars a couple of years ago that I didn't know, which was that, like, you know, when he was hanging out with Diamond Head en route home, he happened to hang out at Lomas rehearsal studios and saw Motörhead rehearsing there, which is a story I'd never heard. So he was everywhere. He's following them around on tour in the States with his old friend Skitchy. I mean, a fanatic, you know. So yeah. So with regards to So What in the magazine, he understands what it is to be a fan. He gets it, and you know, he knows what fans appreciate and what they don't.
And hopefully, I'm sure this is not the first story. Like, I grew up in Canada, buying Kill 'Em All as a new release, and not being able to play with any of my friends because it was just too extreme. You know what I mean? So it put me into the closet. And arguably, like, they really are the biggest band, and that's not like it's bragging rights, but they really are they're bigger than the Stones, they're bigger than the Beatles. They resonate not with like every country on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, it's a beautiful thing.
They speak to everyone, and exactly. I think that one of the things as well, you know, I think that James is, I mean, it's going to sound poncy, but, you know, if Tom Waits is respected as a lyricist and Bob Dylan is respected as a lyricist, and as they should be, especially Bob Dylan, I mean, my God, you know, the poet. But James is in his own way as important and powerful a lyricist as Dylan, as Springsteen. You know, I mean, obviously, when I say that, someone's going to look and say, yeah, well, bang your head against the stage isn't exactly intellectualism. No, but I will say that there are, you know, Harvester of Sorrow, stuff like that, you know, that is deep shit, and it speaks to a lot of people, and it has given a lot of people the courage to feel emotions that I don't think they would have felt before. And amen to that, you know, amen to feeling free to be able to express your pain, you know, in a positive way. And I think that that's another underlying aspect of Metallica, is that they have helped so many millions of people do that, not because they designed it, just because that's what they need to do themselves, and it's massive. But to give you some synergy again, to bring your story to maybe a full circle here, you talked about Kill 'Em All. I talked to you at the beginning of this about that obsequious piece I did for Sounds on Motorhead and Another Perfect Day, that a fan writes, as Gary Bushell said to me proudly. And the fact that I went to a festival in Dublin and saw Motorhead, and that Lemmy gave me that one-arm hug. Remember I was telling you all that, my nose is in his armpit and everything. Well, I drank copious amounts of vodka on the ferry home and ended up vomiting all over. I mean, I must have vomited over so many surfaces and things and so on, including myself. And I remember struggling up the stairs to the flat that I lived in, and there was a brown rectangular envelope on leaning against my front door, which I did not recognize and had never had one before. I opened it up, and it was a complimentary copy of Kill 'Em All from Music for Nations. It was the first free record I ever got sent as a quote unquote writer. Now I'd listened to the No Life Till Leather demo tapes. That tape had come through town, but I struggled back from seeing this Motorhead gig. I literally crawl across the threshold with this thing, and I just threw it on the turntable, and it blew my fucking mind. I mean, it really did. So there's some synergy, kind of cool, I think.
And here we are.
Here we are.
You are beautiful. Thank you so much. This is
brilliant.
amazing.
Thanks very much. Great.
I
Excellent.
appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Stay in
indeed.
touch, I hope. Okay.
Please. Well, yeah, I mean, I presume, I don't know if you've got my information, but feel free. And if not, you can, I mean, ask Debbie, she'll give it to you. But yeah, absolutely. Please stay in touch. It'd be great.
All right.
Thanks very much, mate.
Cheers,
All
man.
right.